Hey there, it's Elizabeth Power, and I've been thinking about something a lot lately, but haven't put it down on paper. So I'm just doing a little quick take here to give you an understanding of what I'm thinking about. I'd love to hear your feedback. I think this would have been helpful to me when I was a lot younger and trying to figure out how to live my life as somebody who'd gotten really good at being very dissociative for a long time. Back in the 90s, I heard Bennett Braun speak at a conference where I was presenting, and he was talking about his Basque model of dissociation, that in every situation there was behavior, affect, sensation, and knowledge. Well, this made sense to me, but I think he left something out, and I believe I told him so. If I didn't, not to worry, next time I see him I will. And that is will. One of the things that happens when childhood is tough for people, whether it's because of natural disasters, I think of Hurricane Helene or Milton, or all of the natural disasters out west in terms of wildfires. It doesn't really matter. Natural disasters, accidents, medical crises that a person experiences or that their caregivers experience, financial crisis, homelessness, and of course the ever-present abuse and neglect, which is what we always think of first, but we got to think about these other things too. That whatever it is, it so overwhelms a person, you got to think about how tall they are, how short they are, how young they are, the resources they can access, and their environment. No matter how young or old they are, if something occurs in their life that makes them think at their age, at their level, that they might die or be badly injured or lose their mind, their brain is processing it as a traumatic experience. Now, almost always in these situations, somewhere the issue of power comes up in terms of how is it used. How do we use the power that we do have in terms of protecting our young and ourselves and doing things in a way that the Hawaiians would call pono, or righteous, or good. And there are many other phrases that people use to talk about that which is the, quote, maybe right thing to do. But here I want to talk to you about will and about spirit and how they relate to this model that Bennett Braun started. I think when you think about dissociation, if I'm in a situation with a physical disability, maybe as is true, I have knees that dislocate. If one of my knees has dislocated in that moment, the way that I look at what am I experiencing physically and what do I know and what choices can I make? Can I get up? Are there people around to help me? Does an ambulance need to be called? Usually not, by the way. What's my emotional state? Well, I'm embarrassed, I'm sure. That would be true. And I'm also anxious and frightened. And what is my behavior? Can I control and contain my behavior so it's situationally appropriate, even though I'm in pain and feeling very vulnerable? So when you look at each of these elements, and then for those of us who have a spirituality, to add spirituality in, suddenly we begin to see there's a range of experience for every event, for every situation in our lives. And that range, that pattern, should and does vary. Now, this is a lovely kind of flat way of looking at things, but I want to show you what happens when you get going on this. Here we go. All right. So the first thing is state one, you're giving a speech. I want to assure you, if I'm giving a speech, I do not want to feel my body. I don't want to feel my knees and how they hurt or my back. I want to have my best face on, and I want it to reflect what I feel inside, regardless of what's going on with my body. I want to be aware enough of what's going on in my body that if, for example, I begin to feel faint, I can get assistance before I pass out on the stage. But now let me show you what happens with number two. I've given the speech. I've gotten the applause. It was great. I loved it. And I sit down and let me tell you, my dogs will be barking. That means my feet are going to hurt and my knees are going to hurt. And I'm going to be going, oh my God, did I do okay? The entire pattern shifts. I'm still going to be really connected to my affect, but it's in a different way. It's going to be going from wanting to put out my best face and have my heart up and my joy up to just kind of turning it all off again. And then behaviors, or how am I behaving? You know, when I'm doing a presentation, I'm keenly aware right now, for example, that I need to look at the camera and not up at the title on the slide. There's all kind of behavior of which I'm keenly aware when I'm giving a speech that I'm not nearly as much aware of when I'm done especially if I'm just sitting in a chair. That little gray dot that's over there so far to the left might ought to really be a lot further to the right, unless, of course, it's after the event, I'm sitting down and I'm having to talk to a lot of people. Then I have to keep my behavior and my knowledge up pretty high. And then my spirituality, how do I feel I have done in terms of the gifts I've been given and the honor I wish to show all creation? How do I feel about that? Friends of mine who are churched would say, do I think God would be pleased with what I've done here? And you can translate a lot of ways. It will make it work for you. Don't make it a burden. But just recognize that in this situation, again, it changes. Well, look what happens if you're driving long distance. You're pretty disconnected. You kind of that road trance where you're kind of sitting there going, just driving along. And you got to pay attention to what you know because there's traffic around, and you got to pay attention to your behavior. But your affect and your spirit are not nearly as engaged necessarily. You still have to be aware of the choices you're making. Is it safe to pass? Should I speed up? Should I slow down? How close am I to my exit? Where am I going? You still have to keep knowledge and will and behavior together enough to pull that off. But the rest is kind of ho-hum. So, all right, so you're driving along and you're over the hills and through the woods to Grandma's house. You go, you get there and you see Grandma. And it shifts again to this fourth state, this light green one, where you're not as aware necessarily in terms of what you feel in your body, but you're a lot more than you were driving down the road, kind of in a road trance. All of a sudden you're coming alive. And your knowledge, you're not nearly as worried about what you know because you just saw somebody you love and you want to run toward them and hug them. And your feelings are high and they're positive high, not negative high. So see, there's a whole nother axis for each of these elements. And your behavior, you probably are not going to be maybe as aware that maybe there's a button unbuttoned, or maybe you had something in your lap that you just knocked off. You're running to see someone you love. And your spirit, my spirit, when that happens for me, just feels very excited. It's like I've got sparkling fireflies all in my chest. So that's a whole different pattern than driving long distance when you're halfway there. Now let's get personal. Let's talk about kidney stones. When a kidney stone moves around, you're probably going to be really connected to what you feel in your body, because if it hurts, it's going to really keep your attention, let's just say. You might be less aware of what you know because you're trying to manage acute pain. You might be somewhat less, if not much more less, aware of the choices you're making because of the impact of, have I said it, physical pain. Your behavior, I walked in on a friend of mine who had a kidney stone, and I swear she was chewing wood. She was chewing on the door frame. You just never know what you might do if you've got kidney stone there. They can be really wicked. And my spirit, when I have a kidney stone, I have a keen sense of chaos in it spiritually at that moment, but also that things will somehow turn out okay. That's a whole different pattern than any pattern we've been talking about so far. But after it passes, it shifts again. And let me show you. It comes much more back to center. You're probably, thank goodness you're not as connected to your body. Maybe you took some Tylenol with aspirin, or maybe you got medicated at the ER or something. And your knowledge, well, you have to probably be a little more alert to what's going on depending on what you've chosen to do about the kidney stone, and probably much more midline about your choices, but you may not feel so well emotionally because of the kidney stone. And you'll be more aware of your behavior than you were when you were writhing on the floor. So every single situation, every moment, every experience has a different pattern, just like I've shown you. If you can imagine what that means about how we really manage as human beings, it means harmony and coherence, that we need to have sort of a harmonic convergence internally, that when we are too far out of the boundaries, this is like, imagine like a highway, when we cross the yellow lines, we're probably going to have a little more difficulty. So this is really important. But without some kind of degree of harmony and coherence internally, something that stays within the lines, there's a whole different level of chaos, because you're not sure what to do or where to go. The footing is very uncertain unless you can keep it in balance. But balance doesn't mean a flat line. It's this broad range of patterns where we're keeping it in the line and looking at what is situationally appropriate. I hope this gives another way of thinking about things that's helpful to you. Thanks so much, and I'll see you again. I'm Elizabeth Power of the Trauma Informed Academy, and you can find me at elizabethpower.com. I'll see you again soon.